KWFM, South Tucson.
The views of this program are not necessarily those of KWFM, its management, or its sponsors. The host is solely responsible for the content.
On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and Billy Higgins, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my jazz heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome inside the studios, everybody of KWFM 1330 The Star. This is The Jake Feinberg Show, and we're happy to have all of you along with us today. When I first talked to my guest, I explained to him that I was born in 1978. He paused and said, "I have a dog that's older than you." These musicians from the middle of the world, the islands, had the opportunities to engage directly with the indigenous music of their own people. My guest today hails from Trinidad, a region that is inculcated with steel pan drums, calypso music, singing, and danceable rhythm. He grew up with a father, John Buddy Williams, who was his idol and a bass player himself. My guest gravitated to this instrument and studied in England before coming to the U.S. in 1969. After that, he was getting opportunities to play with the most unselfish, yet self-assured generation of musicians in our fragile history. Ron Carter, Donny Hathaway, Donald Byrd, Art Pepper, George Cables, Elvin Jones, Billy Higgins, Woody Shaw, and Cedar Walton. The styles of music varied from post-bop, blues, gospel, soul, fusion, up-tempo funk, and world beat. And this versatility provided many opportunities for my guest to participate in the LA studio scene in the 1970s, and is continued to this day as part of Cedar Walton's working unit. It's time to climb the ladder with bassist David Williams. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. Hi, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, Jake. How are you?
I hope that intro did some justice to you.
No, I was listening, and you named most of my heroes there.
Why are they your heroes?
You know, I grew up listening to a lot of those people, the ones who were a little older than myself. And when I first left Trinidad, I went to London in 1962. And I was hearing a lot of that music over there. And so my dream was always to come to the United States. I know I had to come here in London. I didn't have the experience. I hadn't played with those people, but I was listening to their music. I had heard a lot of Billy Higgins and Lee Morgan. And so it was just a dream. It was a passion. It was something I knew I had to do. And I got the opportunity to come here to visit. My sister was here at the time, and living in New York. And my plan was to come visit her for a couple of weeks, and I'm still here.
but let's not jump too far ahead. I wanted to ask you, growing up in Trinidad, how did the music from your homeland influence your playing, especially the steel drums?
I think it has a lot to do with the way I play today, you know, and I notice almost everything I write sounds like something that could be played on the steel pans, and some of it sounds like stuff written for the steel band, even though consciously it's not. You know, some of the stuff I write, I love to write lyrics, a lot of vocal stuff, but I just grew up. I have that part of me that's attached to the steel drum that I guess I'll never lose. I hope not to lose it. So even when I play like straight ahead and bop and all that, there's always that dance feel, and I loved it. I dance when I'm playing too, Sometimes I don't even notice how much, and people bring it to my attention,
Oh, absolutely. I have a couple of classic, vinyl records where you're playing bass, and it's like you can see you're almost dancing with the bass. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, and for me, I know when I play and I'm not dancing, I know something is wrong.
Right. You're not feeling it.
Yeah.
When you went to London, I was reading somewhere that your sister got a scholarship to the London School of Music or something like this, and
yes.
And you kind of just tagged along. I find that to be fascinating. I think it's interesting that there was flexibility in the system for you to go and kind of continue your growth.
Well, back in those days in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, Trinidad was still Trinidad and Tobago. We were still British, under British rule. And so it was much easier to go to United Kingdom as opposed to coming to America. So a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of nurses immigrated back then. My sister she got a scholarship to study at the Royal Academy of Music. She's a classical pianist. And so, yes, I tagged along. The first opportunity I get, I was able to get into the London College of Music. Had a great teacher. He was with the London Symphony. And, that was it. I traveled around Europe, and I played, but I wanted to play with the names that I'd heard on records, Billy Higgins and Lee Malvin, Joe Henderson. That's the stuff I was listening to.
There was like a Blue Note. You were getting like Cornbread or like those kinds of albums.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
Oliver Nelson, everything. Freddie Hubbard.
And you, so you came. I actually in London. How many? What kind of world music? Like, what kind of music from Africa was going on at that time? Like, how old were you? And if you went out, how would you describe the world music scene in Britain at that time?
I left Trinidad when I was almost 16 in 1962, and there was some African music. I played with a band, some musicians from not from Kenya, from
Nigeria,
and South Africa, and it was wonderful. We made one record. I got a copy of it not too long ago. I'd never heard it until recently. There was some great music. The trumpet player was Mike Filana. I don't know if those guys even still around. And I was seeing the American musicians, Sonny Rollins and Monk. I would see them at Ronnie Scott's club.
Of course.
And which was the original Ronnie Scott's. They were located. It wasn't the location where they're at now. It was a previous location, but that was like a small club, smaller. And it was like a little basement place. But I saw everybody in there. And I was able to play, but I couldn't get to some of the stuff I wanted to get to because, of course, the scene was much smaller in London, and there were a couple of bass players, Dave Holland, Ron Matheson was another one, maybe one or two others, but they did all the work, and I used to see them play. I love those guys. But, there wasn't the opportunity to really play because the scene was much tighter and sewn up by these guys. So, I knew I had to get here.
No, I mean, it's very well articulated, but I'm not going to let you get away. I want you to talk about this band of African, what was the name of the album, and how would you, I'm very fascinated, and quite frankly was, the Fela Kuti, from Lagos, when you listen to his music, especially from a little bit later than that late, he was in London as well, sort of got his, he got kind of, hip to the scene, if you want, and he came back and sort of did his own thing, but was it more acoustic music? How would you describe that music that you were playing with that group?
Yeah, what we were playing was acoustic. We had a guitar player, but he was but the only guy had never even seen a bass pickup or amp. I'd seen an amp, but not for a bass in those days. So it was still, I was playing with a mic, and so it was acoustic. The band was called the African Messengers. I don't know who came up with that name, but there you have it, African Messengers.
Well, I'm going to do my research on that. And you got a copy of the vinyl?
I do. I wish I had gotten it out before you got.
It's okay. It's okay. We got plenty of music queued up for you.
Yeah.
You've made it very clear that there were a couple of bass players like Dave Holland who really had locked everything up. You knew you had to get to the States, and when you did, you wound up attending a workshop in 1969 here. But the Eastman School of Music and the players that came out of that school had a profound impact on your early career. And I wanted you to talk about, for the record, that encounter at this workshop with Ron Carter and what he did and kind of spurred your early career a little bit.
Well, when I came, I came for a visit. My plan was not to stay because I still had my place in London and, all my things. One night out, a friend of mine from Trinidad, he was taking me around. I had no idea, did not know New York, had no concept. I just knew it was big. It's the biggest thing I'd ever seen and overwhelming, And he was taking me around, and we happened on this workshop. Beaver Harris was the drummer, Gretchen Monker, some other guys, Kiani Zawati, Roland Alexander. These are Brooklyn guys. But they were doing this workshop, and I recognized the names on the marquee outside. So I told him, "Let's go in here." He was not a musician, but he took me in, and we sat through the 2 sets. But Jimmy Garrison, whose name was on the marquee, he never showed up. So it was wonderful anyway. I enjoyed it. And so the next night, I told my friend, I'm going back there because I want to hear some more of this music.
Right.
He said, no, let's go somewhere else. So I told him, look, you go ahead with whatever you're doing. I'm going to find my way there. I'll find my way back. So I get to the workshop, and all the musicians get there, and no bass player. So they played the first set, and on the break, I introduced myself to Beaver Harris, and it seemed like Beaver was like the band leader. And I said, man, can I sit in? Because I noticed Jimmy wasn't here last night, and he's not here again tonight. So he looks at me like, who's this guy?
I love it.
And then he says, okay. So, oh, man, that was the greatest 2 letters I've ever heard. So I jumped in a cab, got my bass. I came back, set up, played 1 set, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't get any feedback from the musicians. So, my little ego was kind of crushed, and I'm thinking, oh man, nobody even said anything to me like, hey, you sound good, but nothing, Of course, I didn't know the music they were playing, but I had good ears. And at some point, I said, I better get out of here because I don't think I did that good. So I zipped up my bass, packed up, and I'm picking up my bass to walk out. Beaver grabs my arm and he goes, "Hey, see you tomorrow." Huh? And
wow!
It just sounded so good, So of course I went back the next night, played, and before I knew it, I was in the band. By the end of that week, I knew all the guys, and then a couple of nights later, Beaver hands me a plane ticket. He said, "Hey, we're going to Pittsburgh on Sunday." And so I'm thick in this thing, man. Didn't even know how I got there, but that was my introduction. And of course, I never left. At that point, I knew I wasn't going back to London because this was, for me, this was my dream.
Oh my! I have to. I'm totally floored by this story because this is like your first week in New York City.
First week,
and
don't forget, I still had my ticket out of here because I was just visiting for a couple of weeks.
And you were going to go to but you went to Pittsburgh instead.
I went to Pittsburgh, did the gig, and by the time I got back, I enrolled. I got offer to go to Rochester to work with Gap Mangione, Chuck's brother.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for a couple of months, came back to New York, then I got an offer to go. Ron Carter told me he had just spoken to Roberta Flack that day, and she's looking for a bass player. So the next day, bright and early, I was on my way to Washington and stayed with her for 2 years.
You know, something of a values question here, but you brought it up. You know, it was something that should be said for that generation, the Beaver Harris and how do you say his name? Gretchen Monker. Gretchen. Those guys, you know, you were looking for feedback, and my generation craves positive feedback. You know, the younger generations really, we live and die on that stuff, and parents today are so afraid to be even slightly critical, to crush the hopes. And it's like, there you were, but really that generation was epitomized by saying, if they didn't say anything, then you did a good job.
It was okay, but I didn't know that.
Right, exactly.
and you know, I thought, you know, they would say something, and it was funny, man, that it was like I wasn't even, I mean, musically we had a great time, you know, but as far as, you know, coming around and shaking hands, they were there, you know, it was like almost, but now I know that it was because it was almost like they felt, hey, that's how it's supposed to be. You like part of the band, you know.
Oh, what an amazing, you know, you have, but you deserve it, because even today I was talking to a bass player on the West Coast, Putter Smith, and I just brought up your name, and he's like, oh man, I saw him play. I mean, this is a guy pretty much your generation. You guys never really formally met or anything, but you know, I mean, he's seen you play. I've never heard any. I think the reality is you obviously have chops, but I think it's also probably the way you carry yourself in our conversations, just sort of a dignified, classy way. And there's a little bit of a little magic dust on you as well. I think there's no doubt about that. That's a beautiful way to, although I read this story where I guess Ron Carter came in and you assumed he was going to play the bass, but actually he brought his cello and said, no, you play the bass. Is there
something? You know, he came in one night, the same gig with the band was, name of the band was 360 Degrees Musical Experience. That's the name of the band.
Oh, that's great.
And a couple of nights after I was there doing it, Ron walked in, and I was like, oh man, I kind of froze up because I'd never met him. But as soon as I walked in, I knew who he was. And then Beaver goes to me. He said, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, this is Ron's gig. I said, oh, okay. Thanks a lot for telling me. You know, so at which time, you know, I was getting ready to move aside because the man is here. And he said, no, you stay there. So because he saw me getting ready to get out the way, he said, no, stay there. And he went to his car and brought in his cello. And he set it up, and, oh, man, we played, you know. So, and the thing is, even up till this time, I hadn't rehearsed with the band. It's just, it's like I knew the music, even though I had never played it before. You know, I had good ears, and I'd been listening to these guys so much on record, and, you know, a lot of these guys had recorded with Archie Shepp, and, you know. It's like I knew
the best you can, how did you keep yourself emotionally contained without getting too giddy? I mean, the idea is here, you're listening to these records in London, you're like, God, I got to get over there, at least get into the scene, and then let alone you're thrust immediately into it. I mean, I think out of all the guys I've interviewed, it's, you know, Ayrton's story was very compelling coming from Brazil. Ayrton Moreira, you know, in many ways he was shunned by his own the Brazilian clubs. They would not let him play. It was the Jazzers that really discovered him. But you already were hip to the names of these guys and just wound up in a Brooklyn club, and Lord knows you're on the road, and then and then the idea of putting their arm around you and, you know, giving you these tips to say, Ron saying, oh, by the way, Roberta Flack needs this, Gap Mangione needs that. I mean, that to me is just solidarity. It's a small but beautiful brotherhood.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, it's like, how do you prepare for life and practice for life, you know? So it was like, even though I hadn't worked with these guys before, I was preparing myself for it, even though I didn't know it at the time. Whatever work I did in London, even though I hadn't had the opportunity to work at Ronnie Scott, so with Stan Tracy and Ronnie Scott himself and those guys, but I'd seen them play, and I was preparing myself for it. But once I got over here and I got into this situation, it's like, you know, this is the apprenticeship. It's right on the bandstand. You don't, you know, it's here.
Exactly.
You just step into it.
Exactly. And, you know, that's what the other point I was going to make, It's just the idea that you obviously knew the only way you were truly going to grow and seize the opportunity was by going in that door that opened and take advantage of it, right? Because otherwise you said, no, I'm not ready. I'm going to go with my friend. And then you would have got insecure, and you didn't do that.
Yeah, couldn't do it. I would have been, that scared me, not doing this.
Exactly. David Williams. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. First of all, I was just stunned. You go down to D.C. and you had an opportunity to play with Donny Hathaway, and I wanted you to talk about this fusion that was happening of the best you can, playing with guys that were playing soul music that was steeped in gospel music, and I wanted to talk about the venues that you played at, and how these shows, were they playing, would you play at the old, at the community theaters in the black neighborhoods, and how did that work? I mean, how did it embolden those communities as well, if you can talk about that?
Yeah, well, when I went to D.C., that was I was recommended by Ron Carter, so I went to work with Roberta Flack. She worked a club called Mr. Henry's. She was there, I believe, 5 nights a week. That was her home base when she was on the road. And so I went right into that. She was married at that time to Steve Novosel, great bass player. And so I was thrust into this situation where, I really had to come up with something, because here she is married to a great bass player. And so, right. and she did mention that to me once, that we were, in my first rehearsal with her, she was... I don't know if she was trying to scare me off or what, but she just said, look, you have to come in here with some stuff, because, I have a bass player right up. I can call him right now. He's upstairs. So in a way, it was good for me, because it made me really buckle down, and, I used to shed so much, man, back in those days, because I was open, I wanted to learn any and everything. So I went to work with her. I stayed with her for about 2 years, but in that 2 years, I was able to... I had the opportunity to work with her and Donny Hathaway when they were doing some things together. And while with her, we did some stuff with the Quincy Jones Orchestra. Back then, we did a series of concerts at the Greek Theater, Hollywood Bowl. So it was that kind of, so I got to meet a lot of great musicians. Chuck Rainey. There were some things we did where we would use 3 bass players. It would be Ray Brown, Chuck Rainey, and myself.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh, how did that work?
It was wonderful, because we would switch up, because it was with the Quincy Jones Orchestra. So Ray Brown would do a lot of his charts, his music, with Toots Thielemans, Walking in Space, and all that.
I see.
All that, So it was just. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
The idea was that like you guys would take turns. I mean, Brown would come, maybe Rainey would do some stuff, and then you would come in and do other stuff.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So with 3 bass, I mean, yeah, that's some serious heavy artillery. Because I mean, Ray Brown he's a titan, and so are you. And Rainey is too. That's just that is classic. Did you at that time? When you were in D.C., was that when you first met Donald Byrd at Howard University down there?
Yes, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd met Donald before, because he was teaching at Howard, and I was over there a lot, because Roberta, she came out of Howard, and so did Donny Hathaway. So I was over there. Once I met Donald, I'd go over and help him sometimes with his classes, and they had just put that group together, the Blackbirds. So I kind of fell into that. So I was doing so much at that time. There was so much going on,
Well, David doesn't know this, but we're going to have a little surprise in store for him. We're going to listen to a piece of music and come back and talk about it, okay?
Okay.
you were shedding during that time, my friend. Can you tell me what that was?
No, I was listening, trying to remember. That sounds familiar, but I just couldn't.
That was a live show from 1973 with Donald Byrd, that was known as the Donald Byrd 7, but that's essentially was the Blackbirds, Kevin Toney, Keith Kilgo. But then Donald, see, this is what I love, and this was really one of the reasons I first went after David Williams. Is I said, okay, so Byrd is teaching at Howard, and he's got these young guys in his stable, but yet he wanted to bring in a couple of war horses in the rhythm section, so he brought in yourself and Ray Armando.
And Joe Chambers, probably.
Joe Chambers was, exactly, he was in that, but the drummer on this session was Kilgo.
Was who? Oh, Kilgo, yeah.
Yeah, so it was Kilgo. So then I'm listening, and there's this show that circulates. It's a live show from the Jazz Workshop, and some brilliant eccentric cat threw an analog cassette in off WBCN FM broadcast. And I'll burn you the show and because it's absolutely incredible, David.
Oh, wow.
It's a mind blower. And
you mean that's something I did with Donald?
What do you think? I'm playing something? What do you think? I'm playing some Chuck Rainey for you? Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, that's David Williams in the flesh from 1973.
Where was that?
Jazz Workshop in Boston.
In Boston.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that now.
So I'll make sure to get you a copy of this. It's so great because I was going to play you the beginning. The MC's like, yeah, live from the Jazz Workshop. It's Donald Byrd on trumpet, David Williams on bass. You know, they're announcing it, and then 27-minute jam to open the show. You want to talk about going to a live? I don't think you could go any place really in the U.S. and go see a 27-minute opening song. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? There was so much freedom, and that's the thing that I am longing for. I feel this, you know, like Cedar says, as long as there's music, you know, and I understand what that means. But man, when you talk about the idea that some cat like myself, a journalist or just some teacher, could go have a couple of beers, bring his girlfriend, and watch you guys, that was the opening song, 27 minutes long. That's ridiculous. But that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. You know, with that music, it was like composing on the spot every night.
Exactly.
And that was the thing that, you know, it was always trying to get to something. It was like, you could never get there, man. But that's beautiful. It sounded
Did you not, I just want to be clear, did you not think that was you?
You know, I wasn't sure, because then I'm listening on the phone.
Sure,
too, so
sure.
You know, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, on this show we try to play the songs that the guys were playing. I mean, I try to show respect to you guys, you know. But that really, I mean, talk about, you know, Donald is still with us as far as I know. He is still living.
Yes, from as far as I know, yes.
Yeah, and I just, you know, the idea of mentorship. In some ways, I look at someone like yourself as an example of somebody who came to the States and, you know, was kind of fell in right place, right time, but also, you know, clearly there was this sort of mentoring and there was this sort of brotherhood. And in many ways, Byrd was trying to do that at Howard. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I don't think you're in the, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, the music schools don't operate like that anymore. It's different now.
I think so. I think so. And you know, one of the things back then that was so incredible that the young musicians, that apprenticeship, had an opportunity to. Everybody had a band back in those days. Everybody, Stan Getz had a band, Elvin Jones, Clark Terry. Everybody had a band. So there was just so many opportunities to do that apprenticeship thing, and that's what it was. It was like finishing school on the bandstand.
And for me, I mean, I got a degree in communications, but I've gotten my entire degree talking to you guys. You know, it's like it's and that's what Lou Tabakin said too. You know, if you were too insecure, if you didn't get up on the bandstand and blow, you know, someone else was going to take your place. You know, you had to do that. And competition it wasn't cutthroat. It was appreciated, and you're right. The propensity of ability, the amount of people that had their own traveling bands, and the flexibility within the system, the circuits. I mean, in any event, I don't want to over glorify the time. I think that there were clear, and it was before I was born, so it's a fantasy. But I look at it and I say, I know that society was marred with many things, but one thing that was working very well at that time was the music.
Yeah. I mean, it was a different time. Everything, economics. The great thing, I mean, there are a lot of great young musicians now. I don't go out and hang out like I used to years ago, but when I play, I meet a lot of young, really great musicians, and it's nice to know that the music is alive and well, and I don't think it'll ever be anything other than that. Even though they try to make you believe it's dying, it will never die. This music can't die. There are always musicians stepping in. But back then, they were the personalities, people like Art Blakey and Roy Haynes, and those people, they were such strong personalities. That's what I don't find today. We don't have. I mean, these guys were giants. They were like. I mean, and I just called two of the 5'2" people, Roy Haynes and Art Blakey, two of the shortest, but they were giants.
Absolutely,
they
absolutely.
walked into a room where you got on the bandstand with them. These guys were giants. Johnny Griffin, here we go again, another. And these guys were so. I mean, they was just so powerful.
Yeah, well, what did Bill Cosby say about Jimmy Heath? Little man, big horn, right?
There you go.
And that's it's the measure of the heart, and it's the measure of the love, and the thing is that, there's a lot of young musicians everywhere, New York, Tucson. There's just fantastic players, and I just believe that sometimes. For instance, you just did all this great work with Cedar at Dizzy's Club Coca-Cola, and it's I haven't been to the venue. I'm not gonna, but it's to me there's something very indigenous and raw about what did you say, creating or composing on the spot?
On the spot,
and that is something that I don't understand why that is not being. That seems to have gone away. It's jazz or in general. The industry, there was this decision made, play the standards, play stuff people will recognize, because Lord knows they're paying a lot of money to go see these shows, and they want to be able to recognize this stuff. Whereas I'm coming at it by saying, I want these guys getting up there and just playing. And if it doesn't sound that great, I can walk away and be okay with it. But it was back then, it was spontaneity. And then, of course, you had a guy like Bird, who was just a genius on so many levels. Yeah. And you're going off for 27. I mean, I really would have, seriously, if we didn't have time constraints, I would have played the entire 27-minute track.
Yeah. The thing about the music is just that you can interpret it so many different ways, and you can play the same compositions every night, but it's a different interpretation.
I hear that a lot. No, and I think that's a exactly. You put your little twist on it.
I mean, even though it's the same composition, same arrangement, it's the music, but it's just that you just bring yourself, you bring your life to it, and like life, every day is different. You have different experiences, different emotions. It's just so beautiful, man. It's like it just never ends.
I do just to put a cap on this part of the discussion. Whether I interview a bluegrass player like David Grisman or someone like yourself, or the thing is, you talk about these titans that Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass. That's who Grisman studied with, or he worshipped. You had you listened to these records growing up with Lee Morgan. You saw Art Blakey. You saw Roy Haynes. You saw these people, and I think that some younger musicians, there isn't that kind of leadership. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about guys going in and the owner of the club saying, I'm going to pay you fair wage, but the colored people aren't going to get paid. And then Dizzy Gillespie standing up and saying, absolutely not, we're not playing here if that's the case. That's leadership. That was it was education. It was righteous education. It was just very solid. And that is what's lacking. You hit it right on the head, is that these new younger musicians are set 2, 3, 4 generations removed from those original titans, and there's kind of been a vacuum of leadership. And if nothing else, you can only do so much. And like you said, it's not like you're not like you said, I have a dog that's younger than you, but you're not going out and hanging out anymore as much as you were.
Not as much.
Not as much, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, it's important. And the leadership, there's a vacuum. It has to come back. And I think it only comes back through total awareness and education. I think you have to be smart to know how to, Bird was they were geniuses. They all were.
Well, it was just a different time. Now, what I appreciate with a lot of the younger musicians, they're more business-like than we were back then. A lot of people I worked with, they understand the music industry, the music business a lot more. And so that part of it I respect. But it's a different time, you're dealing with the early 60s, coming up in the 70s. It was just different, Most of the guys, their focus was on the music. If they were fortunate enough to have someone handle the business for them, then they were doing all right. But a lot of times, they were just so engrossed in the music. That's all they did.
This is exactly, and hence the quality was just that much better. And now, like you said, the thing that concerns me, I go back to a values thing. It's one reason I have gone after you guys as musicians, not because you play music, but because of the idea that there was a certain period of time where the values in our society, it wasn't predicated just on money. I realized that Joe Williams, people like that, would sleep in alleyways sometimes. I realized that people got ripped off, and I realized that bands fell apart because one person felt they took on most of the financial responsibility, and then they got, the industry has always been tough terrain, but there's no doubt that it was clearly about the music, because when you open up a set 27 minutes long, that's Jake Feinberg. So, in any event, I wanted to move along, talk a little bit, because I know that Blackbird's their first album, and you were on that album, which is one of the funkiest albums. Was that the first time you went out to California, or you were out there with Flack? But talk a little bit about. I always love asking the guys, because you spend a lot of time out there. Talk about the West Coast jazz scene and the differences between Southern California music scene and the North Bay music scene.
Well, I spent some time in L.A. A lot of the time I was there, I was in the studio. I hooked up with some guys over at, actually, it was Liberace's studio.
Mm-hmm. My engineer just almost fell off his chair.
Yeah. And but these guys, Michael Lewis and Lauren Rinder, they had a team, and they used to put out these disco records. And I don't remember how I got hooked up, but somehow I got into that little scene, and we were putting out all these disco records. And like I said, Liberace, he quietly, but he recorded on this label, but he owned the label. And actually, I did his last album. It was called My Friends Call Me Lee. That was his last album I was on. But anyway, so I was doing a lot of that disco stuff. I somehow hooked up with Herb Alpert and Hugh Masekela with that band.
Right.
Over at A&M Records, I was doing some work over there too. So I was recording a lot. And again, also Art Pepper. I started working with Art, with George Cables and Carl Burnett. I was with Art for about 2 years until he passed, and I came back to New York in 1983.
This is the greatest thing I love about David Williams. The modesty is just overwhelming. In 70, the disco hit Les Spank.
Yeah.
That garnered you.
How'd you know that?
You just leave it to me. I'm a journalist. That's my job. But the point is that you hit this.
That's right, Les Spank.
And it was also an opportunity for you to use the Fender bass. And it's really interesting Monk Montgomery was the first one to record with the Fender bass. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then there's guys like Ron Carter who were amazing Fender bass players, but really don't like the Fender bass. And then
No.
there are other guys like Chuck Rainey who just dominated the Fender. And I'm curious, talk a little bit about your relationship. I know, the upright that's done. We know that's in the pocket. But when you changed what was the electric bass like for you? And it obviously worked well with this up-tempo sort of disco soul stuff that was going on.
Yeah. It was because I tried recording with the upright, with that type of music, and it just didn't work. It was, I couldn't get the presence and the flexibility, the sound I wanted. And then I was hearing like Chuck Rainey and some other players, Jerry Jamont and some other great players.
James Jamerson,
So I put the upright down for a little bit because I was in the studio so much. And but after a while, once I came out of there, I had to go back. I mean, I never gave up the upright. Just I was doing a lot of work with it. When I went on the road with Herb Alpert, Hugh Masekela, and of course that was the electric. And I loved it, but I just had to get back to my instrument, and I had to I have so much respect for the other guys who can, and Jocko and these guys, I have so much respect for them. And the thing is, I didn't spend the time you need to spend with the whatever instrument you're playing. It takes a lot of time, and for me, I always practice on the upright. I would have gigs with the electric, but I didn't really spend the time I needed to with it. And it just cannot. It cannot be done if you're going to. That's that's your instrument. And that's what you're going to play. You have to spend that time with it. It was that period of time you were not. You actually were involved more with the East Coast soul scene, but the Motown moved to Los Angeles in the early '70s, and there was also Hollywood out there, and there were just so many great musicians. But that electric bass sound was just so it had that funky blues sound. Yeah.
But I know what you mean, going back to the acoustic, the wood. And I think that in that mid to late '70s period, there was a longing, I think, among the real jazzers and the titans that were left to keep the traditions of whatever jazz means, really keep it intact. 'Cause I think disco and that kind of stuff really, and rock and roll for that matter, amped up the sound a lot. And I think there was the track we're about to listen to right now epitomizes what I consider to be, holistic, music. So we'll take you on a ride again. I think this might be a little bit easier for you to peg, but we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
And that was off the album The Trip. That song was a composition by Woody Shaw called "Sweet Love of Mine." So what do you know? That was Elvin on drums, not Burnett.
Oh, okay.
But a beautiful. Yeah, I mean, just an incredible, beautiful session. And one thing I love about it is that Art Pepper spent a lot of his formative years in jail.
He did.
And he talks on these liner notes. It was a tape recorded. They transcribed it, and he just says something to the effect: the things that you took for granted as a free person, once you become locked up, they become more and more important. You begin dreaming about these things, just anything. Just the idea of being able to walk out of a door and just walk and turn left or right, and just be free, be able to walk and breathe. And, seeing you guys and after, whether it was Burnett or Elvin and George and you and Art, it was just, must have been a very special time.
It was. I remember that time very, very well. We traveled a lot with that band, with Art Pepper. We went to Australia. We spent a lot of time in Japan and just everywhere. And he was such a funny guy, man. Art was a sweetheart, so compassionate. A lot of people who, if you didn't know him, like Elvin, you would think otherwise, but these guys were so sweet, man, and so humble. Spent a lot of time with both Elvin and with Art on the road. I think I was with Art for about 2 years, and I was in Elvin's band for about exactly 2 years. And it's just something that I wish for any bass player to experience to working with Elvin and with Art, or with Art. Of course,
or any piano or drummer to play with David Williams, right?
Well,
no, that's what I was going to say though. That was another thing I think to Bach, and someone said it to me. The idea that Elvin looked very intimidating, and if you didn't go, if you did, and so a lot of people shied away from him. But then Cosby's talking about Coltrane playing a set till 3 a.m. Elvin is drenched in sweat, and he's going over and hugging his wife. And Art was the same way. I mean, he had his demons, as we all do. Mm-hmm. But like you said, he was a tender guy, and actually, I think it's important to point out here, he doesn't often come up in the same conversation as somebody like Train or Bird or Sonny Rollins. But if he spent so much of his formative years in jail, he really could have been one of the. I mean, he is one of the best, but he's kind of under the radar for that reason.
Who's this? Art?
Yes, Art Pepper. Yeah.
Yes.
I have to ask you. This is what was it like? I know you filled in for him a few times back in the 70s, but when that call, when Sam Jones passed on and you were called to fill his role as part of Cedar Walton's group, how did you, at that point, I mean, it wasn't like your resume and your canvas was already full, but how did you feel about taking that on?
Well, I was waiting for it. I knew Cedar's music. And when Sam saw me play at Lincoln Center, there was an outdoor concert one time. And it's the first time I'd met him, first time he heard me play. And we started talking. I knew who he was, but I'd never met him before. And he went to Cedar, and he introduced me. One night I went to Boomers to hear them play, and he introduced me to Cedar. And he told Cedar, look, man, if ever I can't do the gig, if I'm not available, this is the guy. And I was like, whoa, did I hear that? Did I?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's like,
but the thing is, I knew the music because I listened to these guys so much. And Vincent Herring, who works a lot with us now when we work with the quartet, he has a similar story where he was called in because Ralph Moore, who was with us for a few years, he went, he joined the Jay Leno show with Kevin Eubanks, and so he on short notice left, and Vincent was called in, but he knew Cedar's music, and it's so important, and I stress that all the time with students, to know the music, know everybody's music. As much as you can, do you think it was sort of a osmosis where you would see him live at Boomers and it would come in, or was it on record, a combination? Because I think that, again, we go back to this idea of accessibility. I mean, the ability to go out and see live music. And I think, especially with digital, I do, but a lot of people don't have components and record players. So you're limited as to what kind of musical information you can take in via iTunes or whatever like that. So I think it was a combination of being able to see them in a live setting, to see how someone like Cedar would put his own accent on, like you said, a standard or one of his own compositions. You really got to really get inside of it, even if you weren't necessarily on the bandstand with them. Yeah. I listened to them on record. Of course, we didn't have access to. It was like now the youngsters have access to the internet. You have everything on there. Train, McCoy, everything, you name it. So they have so much access to so much more than we had back then. But there were records, and I listened to records. I listened to Diz. So when I worked with him later on, I did some work with Diz, but I knew his music. Again, it's so important to know people's music. When if you get the call you're supposed to know. I mean, hopefully you'll get a rehearsal, but some of these guys don't like to rehearse. So.
Well, and that's true, but I think it's the same thing when I'm inviting you guys on the show. It's imperative that I'm not going to try to bite off more than I can chew. There's no way we could, in theory, go through every single. I mean, I don't have access to recordings of you and Gap Mangione at a smoky bar in Rochester in '69, but you at least have an understanding of the relationships and how things merged, and from a musical point of view, it's respect, and it's essential for growth.
Of course.
I think I'd like to cue up this track here. This is something I actually beg to differ. I think that that vinyl, the reason there is a vinyl renaissance is because iTunes, quite frankly, is very limited in the sense that you can't get to a lot of stuff that was put out on LP, like what we're about to hear. Let's take a listen to this and come back and talk about it. So you want to take a guess at what that was? Can you take a guess what that was?
Yeah. Yeah, I knew it right away.
Tell me.
Huh?
What?
I don't remember what record that is.
Yeah, no, that was the Trio Volume 2.
Oh, okay.
And that tune, appropriately enough, was entitled Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
What a lot of fun! I mean, I was just telling my engineer, and I'm just like, this is the quickness, the swiftness of the notes, and then the sequencing of the ideas when you're playing that solo. I mean, it's like that for any solo, but that's what's amazing is the speed.
Yeah, I've struggled for many years, and I think a lot of bass players, a lot of musicians with the sound. And I know back then I was really struggling because there was maybe 2 or 3 systems bass players used, the more popular, more used ones, which was the not the Underwood, not even the Fishman, the Polytone,
right?
The amplifier and Polytone pickup. There were 1 or 2 others, but it was like trying to find, as always, even now, trying to find the sound you want to hear, what you want to hear. Like if I went out to hear another band, what I would love to hear, I'm always thinking of that. I want to sound like what I would love to hear. And it just takes so long, so many years trying to find that sound, not the notes, the notes, just the sound.
Right.
So I know I was going through a lot of changes then and trying different things. So it was sometimes I enjoy listening to some of this stuff, but sometimes too, I can hear that that little transition where I was moving from one sound to another and trying to really, to hit on something. But it was just a trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I can tell you were going to say it makes you cringe, so maybe it hurts a little bit to hear it if you're trying to.
Yeah.
But you're growing. I mean, that's the whole point. Is that, I mean, that was 1985.
Right.
I mean, give me. I mean, who knows? I mean, that was. You guys were, and again, I mean, it's sort of the pink elephant. It's the elephant in the room. But I mean, the jazz in general, if you want to call it, I hate labels, but music in general, that kind of music, that was recorded in Italy. I mean, Europe has always been more receptive to the music, in my mind.
Yeah.
Outside of those urban centers, but one, David, I wanted to ask you one final question. I hear rumors occasionally from Burnett about the possible Art Pepper tribute concert. Is there any truth to that?
I have been called from some people in Italy. They want to do a Art Pepper tribute tour with the same band, with George Cables, Carl Burnett, and myself. But nothing is confirmed. They've been putting it together, and I've been in touch with them few times, and so has Carl, but nothing has been confirmed yet. But I think they're trying to put something together for next year, probably summer, when all the festivals are happening over there.
Well, I would love to be there to document it, and if nothing else, over the Christmas holiday, if you're going to be in the city, if you're going to be playing it all with Cedar, I'd love to come see you as well and meet you face to face.
Yeah, it'd be good to meet you too, Jake. And I appreciate. I've listened to some of the interviews you've done with Ralph Penland and other people, and it's so wonderful, man. To and to have that information and the information you have, and to really have that passion for it is nice.
Well, if you can in any way try to envision being a 34-year-old man growing up in this time in our world, mm-hmm. I'm searching for authenticity and I'm searching for truth. And the only people that I really feel comfortable getting that from is you guys. Mm-hmm. I don't trust, I have many, many dear friends of my age and things like that, but the society around me inherently is just becoming more and more callous. Yeah. So I need to reach out to those who are gifted and are brilliant, but are actually completely selfless, like I said. So David Williams, it was an honor to talk to you, my friend. I look forward to seeing you in person someday soon. Thank you very much. Thank you for doing what you do, man, and I really, really appreciate it, and I enjoyed this. Absolutely, my friend. You take care. We'll talk soon. Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye. You too. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye. We'll see you next week. Just